Maxim Gardis, communications manager at Razum, is joining us now. Maxim, hello.
Blunt.
Well, so far, we haven't felt the full impact of the fuel crisis ourselves. Why do you think that is? How do you assess the situation? And first of all, which sectors of the Russian economy are the first to feel, so to speak, the effects of the fuel shortage? How quickly do you think will this be felt by the military in general, to the point of reducing the capabilities of the Russian Federation's armed forces?
On the Freedom app, you'll find live broadcasts, special projects, reports from around the world, and up to date analysis. All the most important things right on your smartphone. Simple, fast, convenient, and free. Download the Freedom app from the Apple Store or Play Market. One click, and you're right in the center of the action. Knowing everything with Freedom is easy.
Basically, first President Putin, then Deputy Prime Minister Novak laid out the hierarchy that first and foremost, fuel needs to be supplied to the security forces, meaning both the army and internal forces, that is, the police, the National Guard, and government officials. So that's the kind of hierarchy we're talking about. In other words, the army will be the last to feel the shortage, while car owners, that is, private individuals, will be the first to notice it. Next after them are small freight companies because the restrictions will affect them first and foremost. Delivery services, all sorts of small businesses. Quite unexpectedly, by the way, there was even analysis showing that the fuel crisis was felt by agriculture, since in principle you would think it would be a priority and that it could be organized more or less efficiently, like arranging deliveries, issuing them special vouchers, QR codes, distribution quotas, and so on. That's basically what the Soviet and Russian systems have always done, when distributing scarce resources. But that's not the case. And already, many farming enterprises, farmers associations, and other public organizations are reporting that in the Southwest, that is, Krasnodar Krai, Rostov, Voronezh, and so on, agriculture is experiencing a fuel shortage. Because of this year, in some regions, 15 to 30% less land has been cultivated compared to the same period last year. This is rather strange and unexpected, since everyone expected that small businesses would suffer. But no one really predicted that it would reach agriculture as well. Everyone thought that somehow they would be able to sort it out, but they couldn't.
Speaking of systemic impact, can we actually say that Ukraine has already created, well, some kind of system? Ah, and is Russia, as of today, able to compensate for these losses to its oil infrastructure if the intensity of attacks remains the same or even increases? Subsidies have also increased there. And those who sell gasoline are also being subsidized now. That's it. Or does this whole system, if you confirm that it already exists as such, create some kind of long term effect, a long term problem for the domestic market and the Russian economy as a whole?
If you carefully look through the list of measures proposed by Deputy Prime Minister Novak, you'll see that it's all about redistribution. So, for example, a ban on exports means that the existing production we have won't be sent for export. We won't earn foreign currency, but instead we'll distribute it within the country. Or, for example, there's this interesting measure that for some reason the media barely pays attention to, reducing the quota for sales through exchanges from 15% to 10%. And what does that mean? The thing is, the gas station market in Russia is very uneven. About 60% is tied to vertically integrated companies that have their own oil and a full production cycle. That is, companies like Lukoil, Rosneft, Gazprom Neft, and so on. And 40% are independent gas stations, which have gas stations and oil storage facilities but don't have their own oil. So it's mainly the independent chains that buy oil on the exchange. And what does that mean? Independent chains are primarily found in sparsely populated, remote regions where the big networks don't want to go because the profit margins are small. So, this seemingly harmless rule to reduce sales on the exchange actually means that gasoline from remote regions gets redirected to big cities, and all these measures are about redistributing resources in the same way. Or, for example, when it comes to vehicle fleet maintenance, current repairs are cut back and scheduled maintenance is postponed to some future date. But that's also just redistributing current resources, because if you don't repair the plant, it's not going to start working any better. You're just hoping for a while that it won't fall apart on its own, simply because you're counting on that hope. So, accordingly, all these measures that don't fundamentally solve the problem, they don't increase gasoline production, and as a result, the system's fatigue just keeps building up. The only measure that actually leads to an increase in production is lowering the required standard to Euro 3. I have a feeling they'll even go back to Euro 2. But that's also a kind of peculiar redistribution, since this fuel is of worse quality and its physical volume increases because engine wear and the wear of other car parts also go up. So, this is also a measure that doesn't solve the problem by itself, but just shifts it from some sectors to others, specifically to car owners.
Yeah, by the way, about car owners, that's also in the context, right, of what you just said about this being a long term problem in general for the Russian Federation's economy. And even when the war ends, even if drivers switch to electric cars from China, which, as it seems, is also very beneficial for China, since there have been some disagreements, yes, with the European market for China. So, if disagreements, yes, if the number of electric cars increases, then it will also be difficult for Russia to roll everything back later. That, well, it also won't happen quickly. But,
But they can't significantly increase the number of electric vehicles because they have absolutely no infrastructure for that anywhere except in Moscow.
uh-huh.
So electric cars need to be charged. If Ukraine, well, we're also just building this infrastructure, but it more or less exists, then anywhere except for both capitals, you just can't unless you run an extension cord from your balcony. So, yes, on the one hand, in percentage terms, the fact that they're buying more electric cars looks like huge growth, but in actual numbers, it's tiny.
Uh-huh. Yeah, right? Because if the Chinese,
Chinese electric cars won't solve the problem at all.
well, in general, the Chinese could also come in with the infrastructure too. After all, that's not out of the question either. But the thing is, not all regions have the same subsidies for buying electric cars. They're actually pretty expensive, even compared to Ukraine. But if we're talking about long term problems, well, overall, yeah, if we count the losses over the past 6 months, Ukrainian defense forces have already struck 697 targets on Russian territory using deep strike capabilities. The direct and indirect economic damage inflicted on the enemy is estimated at a minimum of $6 billion. This was stated by the commander in chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky. Just on the night of July 10th, drones struck the Ilsky oil refinery. Taginrog. Hello, that was hit too. Tankers from Madiar were also damaged. As of today, there are about 45, yeah, military 47, but just 14 ships in the waters of the Sea of Azov. That's just for the night of the 9th, according to the count. So these losses, how do you assess them today? How recoverable are they, considering that the shadow fleet of the Russian Federation was estimated at over 1,000 vessels? And now, little by little, they're being put out of commission right under their noses, even in the waters of the Sea of Azov, not somewhere far away. How big of a blow is this? After all, this is Russia's export and import.
Well, according to various estimates, the Shadow Fleet consists of about 1,600 vessels, but that's counting those that have participated at least once in these shipments. So it's not a constant 1,600 ships sailing back and forth all the time. Besides, far from all of them are owned by the Russian Federation. Some of them are just people who have no ethical boundaries and will transport anything, anywhere for money. Today they're carrying oil from Russia. Yesterday it was from Venezuela. Today they're shipping something to North Korea. And the day after tomorrow it'll be from Iran. It's just that this doesn't mean they're Russian or that they're Russians or that they're. But what's happening in the Sea of Azov with the ships being attacked by unmanned systems, those are specifically Russian ships flying the Russian flag, owned by Russian owners. There are far fewer of those. In general, though, Russia still has a lot of tankers, hundreds of them. But the rate at which they're being damaged is still very high. After all, 45 in a week, that's a lot. So the number of tankers in Russia is large, but it's not unlimited. Plus, the same problems will arise there if things keep escalating at this pace, just like we're already seeing with truck shipments along the Mariupol Crimea Lave route. Drivers don't want to go. Drivers aren't taking trips. The cost of trips has already skyrocketed from 1 million before these attacks to 2 million rubles per trip now. That's a lot. And well, not every product is worth ramping up like that. So attacks on tankers could lead to the same kind of problems with the crew. So, well, honestly, a tanker that's 140 meters by 20 by 7 and moves at 22 to 26 kilometers per hour. Honestly, that's a pretty easy target. Uh, and people will start to wonder, should I even go?
Is it worth it?
And is it really worth it? Yeah, worth that kind of money, especially since the insurance mechanisms in Russia are failing.
Oh, no.
So there's no guarantee that everyone will get paid.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Maxim, for joining us. Maxim Gardas, communications manager at Rosem We Stand, was with us on the line.